It was 7 years ago when I first delivered a sermon in which I said to you from this pulpit that offering thoughts and prayers is tantamount to saying, I have absolutely no intentions of doing anything at all to help you in the current crisis that you're in. Now, I don't remember my sermons that well typically, but that one was drilled into my head by the unexpected death of my father just a few days after I delivered that sermon. My dad was 91. He had outlived my mother. He'd outlived my sister, virtually all of his friends, and he died quietly in his apartment that was in my older brother's home in Alabama, where he lived the last several months of his life. There was no one to go to a funeral, so we didn't plan a funeral. His remains were cremated. I met my brothers at the cemetery that's on the Civil War battlefield in Glasgow, Kentucky, our hometown, and we laid his remains to rest with my mother, surrounded by just 3 or 4 of our cousins that came to the graveside with us. I realized that I had taken something from all of you by the sermon that I had delivered a few days earlier. If my father had lived closer to us, if you had known him, we might have had a funeral here with flowers and the buffet meal that always goes with church funerals. If we had even had a funeral in Glasgow, Kentucky, you could have sent flowers to the funeral. Or if I was coming right back home, you could have even exercised that common Southern tradition of showing love in the form of casseroles. Open 1 can of cream of mushroom soup. But circumstances left you with little you could offer but your thoughts and prayers. And I had just emphatically told you how little that means. In the last few months, following increasingly violent mass shootings and huge demonstrations against unjust police killings of black motorists for such egregious crimes as taillight being broken, the use of the phrase thoughts and prayers by too many insincere politicians has brought the hollowness of that offering into very sharp focus. More and more people are now emphatically replying to these political offers of thoughts and prayers saying, your thoughts and prayers are not working. They're not working. Or keep your thoughts and prayers, give us some real action. Now I want to dial this back just a little bit because I've said harsh things about this, and now that I'm hearing similar things being said in the media, I recognize that the sincere and loving route of saying to someone that your thoughts and prayers are with them, that can express sincere concern for someone when there's nothing that you can directly do to aid them. Just as an example, in our own community, Deb Pearson, a member of our church who's been either in the hospital or virtually homebound due to multiple surgeries that led to the amputation of her left leg last summer, she's been isolated for nearly 2 years, over 2 years now. Well, this week she got shingles. And she said to me, this is more painful than any of the surgeries I've been through, and she's been through a lot of surgeries. And I did what Southern pastors are supposed to do. I offered to bring some food over, and she said she just couldn't eat anything. So there are circumstances where the moral equivalent of thoughts and prayers are just about all you've got to offer, your emotional support. As you know, we have a fairly large internet audience, and many of those people have no church connection but us. So I correspond with people all week long, some of whom are dying of cancer. I'm corresponding with 3 parents right now who have lost an adult child to suicide. I talk with people on the West Coast and on the East Coast and in England, sometimes New Zealand and South Africa. And though I often find myself saying to them such things as, I grieve with you, I wish I could be there to offer you more direct support. When I write those things, even coming out my own fingers, it feels like I'm offering them my thoughts and prayers. I mean, I personally feel the inadequacy of it, but the helplessness that sometimes there's just not much else that I can do. Now, maybe we just need to avoid using those specific words because they've become associated with the hypocrisy and the phoniness of politicians who will say that their thoughts and prayers are with the survivors in Texas after the church shooting, when in fact they are in a position to change the laws. They could do something. And when you say thoughts and prayers as a replacement for doing something, that's obviously an insult. I saw a meme that sadly depicts a picture of the current Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, saying to those families that have lost family members in the shooting in Las Vegas and in Texas, my thoughts and prayers are with you, but my votes are with the NRA. Now, he didn't say that, of course. That's words being put in his mouth, but that's what he does. Sometimes expressing sympathy, showing some empathic response is all that we can do. But when we can do more and that's all we do, isn't that religious hypocrisy? Yes. Is it too big a word to say blasphemy? Can liberals say blasphemy? That it is an insult to God. Alexander Campbell, one of the founders of the Christian church movement in the 19th century, an Irish evangelist, said that anything for which you will get on your knees and pray, that you will not then stand up and work to accomplish, is an insult to God and a disappointment to yourself, because that's not how prayer works. For me, the whole practice of intercessory or petitioning prayer is theologically suspect. It harkens back to a supernatural theistic view of God as a person who grants wishes. And that's the God that most people have in their heads when they began their childhood prayer practice. Prayer is not just asking for God to do something. Prayer, the practice of meditation or contemplation, is rich and beneficial. It's much to be praised. It should be taught in spiritual communities. But the reading of a wish list at the sky god, as if God is some kind of 12 months out of the year Santa Claus, that's embarrassing. And I think it really is blasphemous. And I hate that the word prayer becomes tainted with this wish list kind of thinking that really is magical thinking. Prayer in and of itself, meditation, silent thought, there's tremendous health benefits, spiritual benefits. It's good for us. We should be absolutely promoting its practice, but I think I rarely talk about it because it's associated with the wish list stuff, which it's not religion, it's just magic. Recognizing that there can be a very laudable and sincere sentiment behind offering someone your thoughts and prayers, and a very legitimate and helpful way to have a rich and meaningful prayer life, let me also give voice to the reason why so many of us find the use of offering thoughts and prayers to be so offensive most of the time. It goes to these paragraphs we used from the introduction to Bernie Sanders' new book as our wisdom lesson today. Now, Bernie wrote this book for young adults. If you buy it, if you go to Barnes & Noble to get it, you've literally got to go to the teenage section of books to get it. It's written for young people. He tips his hat to the fact that this generation of young people is the most progressive generation we have ever seen in American history. Both Republican and Democratic young people believe in gay rights. Republican young people favor same-sex marriage. They generally believe in science over magical thinking. They have rejected sexism, homophobia, and they are much more likely to understand the dangers of oligarchy than most of our current members of Congress. They want to move away from polluting energy sources towards renewables, and you don't have to argue with them about climate change. They're already on the page with you. However, and not without reason, they are resistant to being organized. They tend to eschew both the church and the government. They understand the issues, and they are aware that they are being handed a world that is in danger of nuclear war. We're closer to nuclear war now than we were back when most of my generation was going through those exercises of hiding under our desks and lining up in the hallways. That was going to help us. But we are at a point where toxic waste is killing the planet. Well, the planet's going to be, as Neil deGrasse Tyson says, if we can quote, are there any men left that we can quote that haven't somehow been in trouble for sexual offenses? But as Neil deGrasse Tyson said, the planet will be fine. Whether humans get to live on the planet, that's what we have to worry about. We are making the planet uninhabitable to human populations. The coming young generation have heard their parents' generation offering their thoughts and prayers in the face of human tragedy. And while they know that we have largely been full of balloon juice all that time, they are not showing great alacrity for laying their hands on the plow of meaningful solutions. And I don't say that to uniquely point my finger at my daughter's generation in order to excuse my own. I'm just painfully aware that time is running out from my peer group. When you ask people who they believe can be the organizing figure for the future of progressive politics, we start to hear the names of people who are older than our current president, and our current president is the oldest president we've ever elected. I love Bernie Sanders. I love Joe Biden. I love Elizabeth Warren. And in my own arena, you know I love Bishop John Shelby Spong and John Dominic Crossan. Always been a big fan of Noam Chomsky. But I also acknowledge that all of those folks are old. And they are going to go the way of Howard Zinn, Marcus Borg, and Elie Wiesel. And I'm not far behind them. I don't have a lot of future. Our generation is leaving an economic, environmental, and political mess to our heirs. But one of the worst things we're leaving them is this rarely articulated belief that just being aware is enough. That we literally build a castle of cynicism, and we house ourselves in that as if that were somehow tantamount to accomplishing something. You escaped fundamentalism. You escaped right-wing politics. You let go of your belief in magical thinking, and you've become informed and aware. Congratulations. But if you stop there, you are not one bit better than the people that never cracked a book. Figuring out the problem is just the start of the solution. It's not the end of the solution. Believing in climate science and dismissing old prejudices about race, immigration, sexual orientation will not make the world safer for people to live in, especially those people that have been the targets or victims of discrimination. We have been the thoughts and prayers generation. And the next generation needs to be just a whole lot more than that. We've taken our churches, our newspapers, our union halls, our human rights organizations for granted. George, where are you? You were just telling me there's a union hall meeting this afternoon. We have 1,700 union members. In this city of 150,000 people in this municipal area, There's only 1,700 union members, and how many folks are you expecting at your union?
2,200 people in the union and 17 people come.
2,200 union members, and the monthly meetings are 17 people. Would you like non-union folks to show up for those meetings? Would that help at all? Our board moderator, could I join a union? Would that stop me? The coming generation has assumed that these institutions would just always be there. There'll always be a church to organize these things. There'll always be a labor union. There'll always be a NAACP. There'll always be organizations. Well, that's just not true. The coming generation almost never attends church. They virtually never read a newspaper. They rarely join a labor union, and they are dismissive of political parties. And that is not going to work. So please forgive me if I've left you with the impression that I think you should not pray. That is sincerely not what I believe. But I do believe that old African proverb that teaches, when you pray, move your feet. Thoughts and prayers on their own are not enough, not if you're capable of doing anything more. We shouldn't pray on our knees. We should pray on our feet while we actively are trying to do good things. We feed the victims of domestic abuse most weeks at Harmony House, which is a good thing. I'm proud to be there. Love being engaged in that ministry. But folks, why do we have 2 to 3 times the rate of domestic abuse in Greene County that we have anywhere else in Missouri? Why? Why? It's not enough to feed them if we can't change what's going on in our culture that makes domestic violence so common. I'm proud of the work that we've done providing tents and sleeping bags and coats to the homeless people in Springfield for years. But folks, should we just help them to live outside this winter better? Or shouldn't we somehow be changing the society that leaves 800 to 900 people living on the streets in this city? Sure, they have our thoughts and prayers, they've had our sandwiches, they've had our sleeping bags, but isn't it time to stop patting ourselves on the back and figure out what we can do to change the world? Pray, but move your feet. Strengthen the organizations that will give the next generation the means to meet one another, to network with each other, because the world depends on them to do a lot more than what we have done.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.